Dr. Wolfson, thank you so much for joining me today to talk about, of all things, mold and mold toxicity.
Yeah, who would have thought when we started our careers, years and years and years ago, after all of our, medical training and health training for that matter, that we would eventually be talking about mold and how it's impacted us and impacting, I believe, everyone. So again, I appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Yeah, can you walk us through what your story, what happened with you and your family around mold? Share that experience.
Yeah, it was interesting because we had often talked about mold over the years, but kind of as one of these top 10 or top 20 things that somebody would be impacted by. Never thought it was going on with us. Not that it couldn't happen with us, but never really thought it was going on with us. And we were living in a house in Arizona. In 2018, it was a rental home. We moved into it for a couple years. And that was when my wife gave birth to our third child, our first daughter. And she had problems nursing. She had problems with tongue tie. She had problems with, gaining weight. And this was shocking to us because my wife is a chiropractic physician. She's all natural, eats all organic, took all the right, supposedly, prenatal supplements and stuff like that, and ultimately would have give birth to this child with these kind of issues. So my wife struggled to nurse, to breastfeed, and the first two she did so well with. And this one, again, struggling there. We did everything we could, talked to everybody we could, every supplement we could, enhance the breast milk production and really the child's ability to nurse well. So fast forward, my wife is sitting at the kitchen table. My wife's not feeling well. She's got a glutathione nebulizer in her mouth. She's got a breast pump in the other hand, trying to express more milk. And that's when she is sitting in the kitchen table and she looks at the kitchen sink, and under there, the cabinetry, and she sees a stream of water coming from under the sink. And that's obviously startled her. She got up, she took a look under the cabinet and saw that there was significant water damage in that particular area. With that, she picked up and she left the house, and she never went back into the house again. We did have a professional come in, and there was mold under the kitchen counter top and under, and in the floor. And we never went back into that house ever again. And that really started us on our mold related journey.
Yeah, and at the time, I mean, seeing that water and getting out of that house, was there any other clues or insights? I mean, could you smell must? Was there any other insight that made you guys suspect it, or was it just that moment, aha, here it is, there's water?
We always thought the house had a little bit of a smell. And like you said, the must smell. And what is the smell of must? Well, the smell, there is nothing that is must, right? And the must describes the smell of water damage, mold, and or bacteria. So we understand that now. We look at some of the health issues we were having at the time. My second son with bloody noses, my oldest son with wetting the bed. Were his issues. And then also our little girl, when she's around mold, she gets eczema is her main issue. So when you kind of look at it through all these things of like, oh, well, this is normal. It's normal for a kid to get bloody noses. Sometimes kids wet the bed. But now you start to put together the fact that really any symptom that anyone has, adult or child, can be related to mold mycotoxicity, which of course you already know. But, since 2018, and I know obviously from your personal experience now, it's like you become one of the worldwide experts on living in water damage. And as I speak to you right now in 2025, I am sitting outside of a restaurant in Sandpoint, Idaho, and we are currently tent camping, and we've been tent camping around the country for the last 6 months in vinyl tents in an effort to never live in water damage again. We are currently building a structure down in the mountains of Costa Rica out of concrete, steel, and glass. And then just like you guys have put together the barn dominium is a wonderful, wonderful concept, right? Concrete, metal, and glass. And, that'll be our next adventure here in the state. We're not sure where we want to do it yet. Sandpoint, Idaho is a pretty fun place. We're having a good time up here.
So when you guys got out of mold, what did you notice the most? I mean, as far as health was concerned, eczema, you mentioned a child with eczema, one nosebleeds, all that went away.
Skin issues, gut issues, sleep issues, weight. If anything, my wife has really struggled to keep weight on. And clearly, there is the majority of people who live in water damage have weight gain, have unexplained overweight. As opposed to underweight, but there's plenty who are underweight, and of course, all that could be, can impact the thyroid function, other hormonal functions. Everything impacts everything, but things definitely improve when we are out of mold. And then as we've kind of gone along over the years, is that actually a house we lived in Colorado back in 2021 to 23, that house did not have mold. We tested it for mold 6 ways from Sunday. And then we finally understood that actually it wasn't the mold, it was water damage bacteria, both gram negative, gram positive bacteria. The effects they have on the gut microbiome, disrupt the gut microbiome, leading to leaky gut, intestinal hyperpermeability, inflammation, ox stress, immune system activation, and then ultimately disease. And it's really been an epiphany moment for me as a physician, and I know you as well. It's kind of like, you cut your teeth, as far as I know, right, in the gluten world, and gluten definitely is a problem for a lot of people. But I think when I kind of came out in my natural heart doctor practice in 2012, it was kind of all about metals, all about gluten, and I think we've really morphed a lot. And that's the beauty of doing what we do, is that we have the ability to change. The medical doctor doesn't. The traditional cardiologist, I mean, they've got one tool in this toolbox, and that's all just the medical tools. For us on our side, it's really kind of coming to that realization of like, wow, this is a serious player. And gluten in and of itself, and lead and paint and all these things, they are not living, breathing organisms. Mold is, and so is bacteria, and it wants to survive. And because of that, it really just leads to so much sickness to so many people. Terrific.
So yeah, let's explore that bacteria that you're talking about. So you'd had your test, because some people get testing done for mold, and if you hire a standard mold inspector, really the main tool most of them are going to use is a simple air test, and they're going to measure, for mold spores, on a tripod 5 foot in the air. And you mentioned bacteria as being problematic in your home, and of course, bacteria being something that can also grow with water damage. Um, you mentioned gram-negative bacteria specifically. Talk about how you determine that over mold. Like, what kinds of testing were you looking at doing that might help people who are watching this differentiate if they've had mold testing negative, but they still suspect their house might be contributing to their illness?
Well, I think there's you use real-time labs. When the mold mycotoxins are coming out of your urine, you have to keep digging. You cannot rely on someone coming in and giving you a negative set of tests. You don't feel well. Your blood, tests do not reflect health. Your urine test shows that there's toxins in there. Maybe even, again, like this, like a Swiffer test that would look for mold and bacteria. And you just have to keep, digging until they find it. And that's what I tell my patients, is that these are your abnormal results. Show it to the inspector, and they have to find it. And if they can't find it, they have to keep trying, or you have to find someone else who can. And you and I talked about this online or offline before we started recording, is that a lot of times it's not even a smoking gun of like a particular area that's the problem. It's just the entire fabric of the home is just soaked in water damage. All of the wood in the home, it could have and likely did come with water damage in there. And it could be living mold, it could be dead mold, it could be the mycotoxin from dead mold, maybe just as damaging. I kind of think about this, Doc, as far as, a dandelion. And if you take a yellow dandelion flower, you blow on it, and nothing's really going to happen. That's the living mold. But the dandelion that's already morphed into that, quote unquote, wisher phase, where you can now blow on it because now it's dead. And now it disperses everything in a very dangerous fashion. Now you have all these toxins, mycotoxins floating around the house, recirculating around the house. Some people experience symptoms. 4 out of 5 times it's the woman who experienced symptoms. 1 out of 5 times it's the man. the man's sitting there and you've had a lot of consultations, like this, and like, oh, it's not, there's mold schmold, there's nothing the matter with my house. And that's the guy who has a heart attack. That's the guy who's on 3 blood pressure pills. That's the guy who's got erectile dysfunction. He feels fine. But the woman's the canary in the coal mine, if you will. I guess that's kind of a long way to answer your question, is that, the bacteria, that's there. It's just, then you start looking for the water damage, and the gram-negative bacteria and the gram-positive bacteria, they disrupt the gut microbiome as well. Those toxins in there damage your own personal gut microbiome, influence your gut microbiome, again, leading to leaky gut, intestinal hyperpermeability. And then now, of course, you have things like undigested gluten particles, coming through. And of course, that leads to extreme sickness. The medical literature on the lipopolysaccharides and high levels of lipopolysaccharides from these gram-negative bacteria, or let's just say bacteria in general, just not to confuse anybody with how things look under a microscope. But these lipopolysaccharides are part of the bacteria, and they get into the body. They generate an immune response, developing anti-lipopolysaccharide antibodies, but all of that is linked to high levels of cardiovascular disease. It could be coming from your teeth. It could be coming from your gut. All those things you need to fix up, but you got to check the house for bacteria.
Yeah, so what I hear you saying, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but water damage is not mold in a vacuum. You get bacteria that grows, you get mold that grows. The bacteria releases toxins. It can disrupt your microbiome. It can colonize your microbiome, and it can release its endotoxins, its LPS endotoxins, which can create a lot of downstream inflammatory manifestation. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's definitely fair to say. The bacteria, that's happening, what's going on there, again, are just as, and maybe more so deleterious. I think you and I both understand that the medical literature is really so young on all of this, and there's so much room for debate in all these different areas because there's just not a lot that's really out there. There's a fair amount that's out there. I've been a medical expert on 2 mold cases over the last 12 months, and then the defense cardiologist, because one's a heart attack case, the other's a case of atrial fibrillation. So the defense cardiologist says, they'll get in some guy from like, Cornell or Yale or something like that, some high profile guy who's got all the credentials and is like, oh, there's no evidence that mold leads to cardiovascular disease, right? And then I come in with a stack of articles, about all the different ways that mold mycotoxins lead to cardiovascular disease. And then within a couple of weeks, the case settles because the cardiologist understands that they've got no defense and had no clue of that. And, again, the ignorance of the physicians is just the way that the medical doctors are trained. It's not anything personal. It's just something that we never get any form of training on in school, whatsoever.